Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into a really fascinating text, the Kybalion. It's this, well, seemingly small book, but it punches way above its weight. It's seen as a modern gateway to a much older tradition, Hermeticism. Our goal here, as always, is to kind of chew on the ideas from our source material, this great lecture transcript, and break them down so you feel really well informed by the end.
Exactly. And the Kybalion, it often comes up, as a good place to start if you're curious about things like Oriental philosophy or maybe the works of someone like Blavatsky.
Yeah.
It has this quality of guiding you through some pretty complex ancient ideas without being, well, totally overwhelming.
So let's kick off with this really powerful quote, almost like a poem from the Kybalion itself. "Do not let the flame go out, kept for centuries in this dark cave, in this sacred temple, supported by pure ministers of love. Do not let this divine flame go out." That imagery is quite something, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, that poem, it's talking about tradition. I mean, the word itself means transmitting or literally passing on the flame.
Yeah.
And actually, that's apparently the root meaning of Kybalion, too. It's all about keeping this important knowledge alive across time.
Right. And if you look at history, you see this playing out. Take Plato, for instance. How did his writings even survive? 1,000 years of the Middle Ages, which were pretty dark and complicated to get to us. Someone, or probably many someones, had to keep the flame burning.
Oh, absolutely. And it's shocking how fragile that process was.
Yeah.
Aristotle's poetic art, it survived because of one single copy. Just one. Held by some Byzantine scholar. And then you contrast that with, say, Chrysippus of Soli, wrote nearly 500 little treatises, apparently. And we have none of them. Zero. So much got lost. It makes you appreciate what did manage to bridge those gaps.
And what a massive gain for humanity when that knowledge is preserved. Imagine if we didn't have Plato. We'd have to wait for another mind just like his to figure those things out again because, let's face it, not everyone gets to those deep conclusions on their own.
And that poem, then, it becomes this kind of call to action, doesn't it? Speaking to you, the listener, saying, be one of these beings, preserve the flame, keep the flame of true human knowledge. And this true and deep knowledge, well, the source defines it as the kind of knowledge that, when placed in your life, can make you a better human being. That's the key tension, really. Knowledge for betterment.
That focus on becoming better, it leads perfectly into this maxim from Jorge Angel Livraga, the founder of Nova Acropole. He had this great way of looking at technology versus character. He said something like, if you take a plane in Rome, a plane that was driven by horses, and a jet plane today, you have no doubt that the vehicle advanced too much. But the man who drove the vehicle, not necessarily.
Right. It's a brilliant observation. The guy flying the jet today isn't automatically more, fraternal or more understanding. And he doesn't necessarily have greater mastery of his emotions than the chariot driver back then. The tech evolved massively, but the human using it, maybe not so much.
Which circles right back to Plato's point, doesn't it? Knowledge is only really useful when it makes us better.
Exactly.
Wow.
And this was apparently a huge concern for Hermes Trismegistus, as the Kybalion presents it. This danger of enhancing man's abilities without him first humanizing himself, giving power without wisdom.
And the example given is, well, it's pretty chilling. Adolf Hitler. The source points out his brilliance, his intellectual ability, his sensational oratory ability. But these things just enhanced his psychopathy. I mean, the quote, Adolf Hitler was better than incompetent, that really stops you in your tracks. It's terrifying.
It absolutely is. And the implication for you, for us, is stark. If you're heading towards an abyss, it's better to go on foot. Because getting an imported car, more power, more speed, just gets you to disaster faster. Speed, agility, efficiency, they become, well, of dubious utility for the advancement of humanity if you don't know where you're actually going as a human being, if you haven't humanized yourself first.
Okay, so let's talk about this central figure then, Hermes Trismegistus. Who was he, according to the Kybalion? That name, Trismegistus. It means 3-time initiated, or thrice greatest, right? It sounds like an epithet, like a title given to someone incredibly wise in Egyptian tradition.
Yeah, exactly. A master of masters. Now, his actual dates, even his historical existence, that's debated. The Kybalion itself mentions a few different possibilities way back in 2700 BC, maybe around Xerxes' time, even being Abraham's or Moses' master.
Yeah.
The truth is, there's no precise date. But the argument goes, someone whose influence lasts at least 4,000 years. That person had to be real, a person of weight. Ideas alone don't usually stick around that long without a powerful source.
And here's that fascinating detail about the Siena Cathedral, a fresco showing Hermes Trismegistus teaching Moses inside a Christian cathedral. You wouldn't expect that, would you?
No, not at all.
But apparently during the early Renaissance, there was this period of, great freedom of expression where such things were possible, even supported.
And the influence of Hermetic ideas, it seems, was incredibly widespread. It didn't just stay in Egypt. It apparently reached India, Greece, Rome, even the Celts and Scandinavians, those Indo-European groups. It pops up in ancient religions, and you can still find echoes of it in modern traditional religions too.
Right, like Clement of Alexandria, a respected church father calling Hermes the inventor of theology. And even St. Albert the Great, a literal saint, reading the Hermetic corpus in the Middle Ages.
It makes you wonder what else was lost, though. Ancient sources talk about him writing, like, more than 45 treatises on medicine alone. Gone. What we do have are key works like Minerva Mundi, which connects matter and spirit, the Emerald Tablet, which is super enigmatic, full of these concise laws, and the Corpus Hermeticum. That's a collection of dialogues like Asclepius talking about spiritual causes of health and illness in Pymander, which deals with man's nature and cosmology, and interestingly divides things into 7.
Okay, so how was this knowledge actually passed down? There's this principle. The ears of understanding are only opened. It sounds like it was very much an oral tradition, from mouth to ear, only shared with disciples who were deemed ready, who had a very well-built character.
Exactly. And that intense secrecy is where we get the phrase hermetically closed or hermetically sealed. It comes directly from how guarded these schools were about their teachings.
And Plato, again, he was apparently really strong on this. He felt it is preferable absolute ignorance than knowledge in inadequate hands.
Which makes sense, right? Think about atomic energy today. It has huge potential benefits, but look at the destruction caused by nuclear weapons. Are we, as a species, really mature enough? The source uses the analogy of humanity being like a baby with a knife in his hand. So these schools, they weren't just measuring how much you knew, the extension of knowledge. They were measuring your verticality, your moral depth, your character.
So that other Hermetic phrase, we must give milk to children and meat to men, it's about tailoring the knowledge, giving people what they can handle, what won't harm them or others.
Precisely. Ensuring knowledge isn't used to their own detriment, nor in the detriment of humanity. It's responsible transmission. And the big symbol associated with Hermes, the caduceus of Mercury, that staff with the 2 snakes winding around it. It was apparently his way of showing how the different worlds or levels of reality are intertwined from the most subtle to the most concrete.
And that symbol is ancient too, found on a Sumerian cup from, 2600 BC?
Yeah, incredibly old. And the snakes themselves are symbolic. If they're just crawling snakes, that represents human energies directed downwards towards Earth, instinct, maybe selfishness, but snakes climbing somewhere. Winding up the staff. That means those same energies are being verticalized, refined, pushing consciousness upwards. It's about inner transformation.
And this connects to the Hermetic view of a human being having different parts, right? A physical body for survival, a spiritual body for higher values, wisdom, and then this middle part, the psychic body, mind, and emotions that often keeps jumping like crazy because we don't learn how to manage it.
That's the idea. The psychic level is the bridge, or maybe the battleground. The ideal is when man balances his psyche, the spiritual passes through it and manifests itself in the world. You become a clear channel. It makes you wonder why basic emotional and mental mastery isn't, a core part of education.
You see echoes of this 3-part idea elsewhere too, like in the Arthurian legends. King Arthur representing the spiritual, Guinevere the soul or psyche, Lancelot the physical or instinctual, and Guinevere's choice, the psyche yielding to the physical over the spiritual, leads to ruin. And Carl Jung even. His break from Freud was partly inspired by this kind of thinking, from alchemy, seeing something above just the psychic realm influencing us.
It's interesting how older cultures created symbols for these deep ideas. Egypt had the ibis for wisdom, Greece had winged Hermes, but our modern culture, despite all its technological prowess, did not create its own symbols for things like love or justice. We still use Venus or Themis. The source suggests this points to a very materialistic era, one that maybe doesn't want to express metaphysical concepts visually or symbolically anymore. Maybe we're more informed than truly formed.
So tracking the history, we mentioned early church figures like Clement who were positive about Hermes, but then St. Augustine came along and kind of controversially linked him to a demonic being. Why? To demoralize Christianity's potential rivals.
That seems to be the interpretation, yeah. A way to discredit non-Christian wisdom traditions. But even with that official negativity, you still had figures within the church, like Roger Bacon or St. Albert the Great, who were clearly interested and kept studying these texts quietly. The flame flickered, but didn't quite go out.
And then, boom, the Renaissance. That seems to be the game changer. The fall of Constantinople sends Byzantine scholars like Giorgio Gemistus Plethon fleeing to Florence. And Cosimo de' Medici seizes the moment, founds the Platonic Academy.
Exactly. And then comes this almost accidental discovery. 14 treatises of the actual Corpus Hermeticum turn up. Cosimo gives them to Marsilio Ficino, who translates them into Latin around 1463. And this translation just explodes. It influenced God and everyone, as the source puts it. Major artists like Botticelli, Raphael, Leonardo da Vinci, they were all soaking this stuff up. It fueled the Renaissance mind.
But wait, how did the knowledge survive before that big Renaissance rediscovery? You mentioned something. Alchemists.
Ah, yes. This is fascinating. The source argues that medieval alchemy wasn't really about chemistry. The true secret was that it had nothing to do with the transformation of metals, but with the transformation of man. End quote. All that talk about turning lead into gold was a cover story, a way to do philosophy and psychology without attracting the wrath of the Inquisition. The real goal was internal, turning the man of lead, the ordinary, unrefined person, into the man of gold, someone who achieved self-domination and wisdom. It was symbolic language.
Okay, so that brings us back to the Kybalion itself. Published in 1908, anonymous authors, the Three Initiates, some suspect people like William Walker Atkinson or Mabel Collins. How does a 1908 book claim to represent ancient wisdom? The source says you will never confuse the date of a historical work with the day it was written. What does that mean?
It means that just because something was written down recently doesn't mean the ideas themselves are recent. Ancient cultures often preferred oral tradition for their most sacred books. Writing it down was sometimes seen as a step down, a decadence, because it made the work vulnerable, open to being profaned by anyone, ready or not. Think of the Rig Veda in India, memorized perfectly for centuries before being written down, mostly out of fear it would be lost otherwise. The transmission was person to person, mouth to ear.
And then you have those incredible archaeological finds like the Nag Hammadi Library in Egypt in 1945. Shepherds found these ancient texts, apparently used some for kindling at first.
Crazy, isn't it?
And among them were original Hermetic writings studied by Gnostic groups, proof the ideas were circulating way back.
And another piece of the puzzle,
Huh?
The Dead Sea Scrolls. Mostly Jewish Essene texts, right? But found within them was a huge passage in the Republic of Plato.
Wow.
Just highlights this universalist vision these ancient philosophical schools often had. They drew wisdom from various sources.
So the knowledge, even if hidden or underground sometimes, it wasn't truly lost.
Right. And those ancient initiatory schools, like in Egypt, they weren't just about learning facts. They were more like spiritual monasteries or accelerators. Masters guided disciples intensely, helping them gain like an experience of a life acquired in 1 year. They compressed the growth process.
And the idea was that these highly developed individuals, these very mature men, would then become a reference point for the whole society. They'd kind of pull all society up. Because we humans, we need external images to inspire us. We need role models of wisdom.
We can contrast sharply, the source suggests, with a lot of modern culture. If you just passively follow all the modifications of the day, all the trends and distractions, it's very unlikely you'll actually become better in that deep human sense.
Yeah, the argument is pretty strong that our current culture often isn't really cultivating man. Instead, it can pull down, animalize, make superficial, banal by celebrating instincts, selfishness, interests. It becomes a kind of counterculture to real human development.
So the pyramid analogy comes back. Society needs that apex of the pyramid, those few truly wise individuals. They generate an ascensional movement that becomes the predominant cultural element, lifting everyone else. Without that apex, the whole structure can sag or even crumble.
Which leads to this provocative idea. Maybe we live in a time that is as obscure as the Middle Ages, but it's a different kind of darkness, a materialist obscurantism, where we're blind not because of religion, but because we only value the material, the surface level. But ironically, maybe that makes it a potentially good time to flourish for people who are ready, who have conditions to understand this deeper ancient knowledge. So wrapping this part up, it feels like the Kybalion and Hermeticism, they're offering something different from just information. It's a formative vertical knowledge, right? Aimed at helping you, the listener, understand and improve the laws of life and become a better human being.
Exactly. And there's a beautiful, almost mystical line from the Kybalion that speaks to this. Wherever the master's vestiges are, the ears of the prepared disciples will open in peace. The knowledge finds those who are ready for it.
That reminds me of those classic fairy tales, you know? The young prince sets off on some noble quest, maybe to rescue a princess. He starts with nothing, no clear path, but because his intention is pure, committed to something elevated, noble, and selfless, then suddenly the latent powers flourish. The help appears, the knowledge that he needs arises. Just when he needs it, the commitment unlocks the way.
That's a perfect analogy. This powerful ancient wisdom, it's always there, available to those who seek it for the right reasons, for growth, for contribution. Maybe that's humanity's real destiny on Earth, to connect with and embody that deeper knowledge.
Definitely gives you a lot to think about. What kind of knowledge are we seeking, really? We hope this has given you a solid foundation. Next time, we'll actually get into the famous 7 Hermetic principles outlined in the Kybalion, so join us for that. Until then, keep exploring.